Parenting isn't easy, but what happens when protection goes too far? Welcome to Threads of Kindness, where today we'll explore 3 unforgettable stories of Karen parenting in action, from a babysitter handling destruction to a playground clash and a theft-turned internet sensation. These moments reveal lessons about boundaries, kindness, and responsibility. If this resonates with you, be sure to subscribe for more real-life insights and stories that inspire change. Megan had worked with children for over a decade, mastering the art of balancing patience with discipline. When Brenda called her for help, Megan was intrigued. Brenda explained she needed someone to watch her 7 children for the weekend, including her 5-year-old son, Lucas, who had been struggling to adjust to a house full of siblings. Brenda's voice had a hint of nervousness as she warned, "Lucas is sensitive. I don't believe in punishment, so if he acts out, just let him cry it out. He'll stop eventually." Megan, accustomed to all sorts of parenting styles, nodded politely. After all, she'd seen her fair share of challenging kids. When Megan arrived at Brenda's immaculate suburban home, she was greeted by 7 children of varying ages, ranging from a toddler who clung to his blanket to a preteen who barely looked up from his phone. Lucas stood out immediately. He was small for his age, but had a defiant glint in his eyes that suggested he was used to getting his way. As Brenda hugged Lucas goodbye, she whispered loud enough for everyone to hear, "Remember, sweetie, Mommy loves you no matter what. You're in charge of your feelings, okay?" The day started off smoothly enough. Megan set up games for the older kids, kept the toddler entertained with blocks, and read stories to the younger ones. Lucas, however, was less interested in group activities. He hovered near the snack table, grabbing handfuls of cookies and glaring at anyone who dared approach. When one of his siblings asked for a turn on the swing outside, Lucas shouted, "No, it's mine!" Megan stepped in gently, suggesting they take turns, but Lucas screamed, "Mommy says I don't have to share!" Megan sighed inwardly, but stuck to Brenda's instructions. "That's okay, Lucas," she said in her calm, even tone. "When you're ready, you can let someone else have a turn." Lucas smirked triumphantly and swung higher, shouting, "See, I can do whatever I want." The other kids exchanged uneasy glances, clearly accustomed to this dynamic. Megan, however, remained unbothered. She had seen children like Lucas before, kids who thrived on testing limits because they had never truly encountered any. What surprised her was how quickly the mood in the house began to shift. The first sign of trouble came during lunch. Megan had prepared sandwiches, cutting them into fun shapes to make the meal more appealing. As the children gathered around the table, Lucas declared, "I don't want this," and threw his sandwich onto the floor. Megan crouched down to his level and said, "Lucas, if you're not hungry, you don't have to eat, but we don't throw food." Lucas crossed his arms and stared at her, daring her to push further. Megan didn't flinch. She simply handed him a napkin and said, "When you're ready, you can help clean up." Lucas hesitated, but ultimately refused, stomping off to another room. Megan noticed the other children watching her, their faces a mix of curiosity and relief. It was clear they were used to their mother swooping in to defend Lucas, but this time, no one was coming to his rescue. As the afternoon progressed, Lucas's behavior became more disruptive. During a group craft activity, he grabbed a sibling's paper and crumpled it up, laughing as they started to cry. Megan intervened, gently handing the child a new sheet of paper. "Lucas," she said firmly, "that wasn't kind. If you'd like to join the activity, you need to respect everyone's work." "Mommy says I don't have to listen to anyone but her," Lucas retorted, his voice rising. "That's fine," Megan replied evenly. "But in this house, we treat each other with kindness. You can sit here with us when you're ready to follow that rule." Lucas stormed off again, but this time, he grabbed a box of markers on his way out. Megan let him go, keeping an eye on him from a distance. The other children, sensing the tension, began to whisper among themselves. "Lucas is going to get in trouble," one of them murmured. Another shook their head, replying, "No, he never does. Mom always says it's not his fault." Megan decided to give Lucas space, hoping he would calm down on his own. She could hear him in the next room, muttering to himself as he uncapped the markers. Then came the telltale sound of something being dragged across the wall. Megan peeked around the corner and saw Lucas scribbling furiously, neon green and purple lines spreading across the pristine white paint. Megan took a deep breath and walked over slowly. "Lucas," she said softly, "I see you're really upset right now. Would you like to talk about it?" Lucas turned to her with a defiant glare. "No, I'm making art." "I can see that," Megan replied, her tone calm but firm. "But walls aren't for drawing. Let's find some paper instead." "No!" Lucas screamed, throwing the marker to the floor. He began stomping his feet, his little face red with fury. Megan stepped back, giving him room to vent his emotions. She had learned long ago that engaging during the height of a tantrum often made things worse. The other children peeked into the room, their eyes wide. "Is she going to yell at him?" One whispered. Megan didn't yell. She simply waited, letting Lucas's anger run its course. Eventually, he flopped onto the floor, exhausted, but still fuming. Megan knelt beside him and said, "When you're ready, we can clean this up together." Lucas didn't respond, but the defiance in his eyes had dimmed slightly. Megan stood up and returned to the other room, leaving him to process his emotions. The other children looked at her in awe. "You're not scared of him?" one asked. "Lucas isn't scary," Megan replied with a smile. "He just needs help learning how to handle big feelings." As the day drew to a close, Megan couldn't shake the feeling that Lucas's outbursts were only the beginning. She had followed Brenda's instructions to the letter, but the lack of boundaries was creating a powder keg waiting to explode. Still, Megan remained calm, knowing she had a plan. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but Megan was ready to face them with the same patience and resolve that had carried her through countless other difficult situations. Little did she know, the real storm was yet to come. As evening approached, Megan prepared dinner for the children, a simple but hearty meal of pasta, vegetables, and bread rolls. The younger ones eagerly gathered at the table, chattering about their day. Lucas, however, lingered in the living room, sprawled on the floor with a toy truck. "Lucas, dinner is ready," Megan called gently. "I'm not eating," he shouted back, revving the truck noisily against the hardwood floor. Megan approached him with a patient smile. "That's okay, Lucas. You don't have to eat if you're not hungry, but the rest of us are going to sit down together. Would you like to join us at the table just to keep us company?" Lucas shot her a suspicious look. "Mommy lets me eat whenever I want." "I understand," Megan replied. "But tonight, this is the plan. We eat together, and then we can play more. You're welcome to join us when you're ready." Lucas didn't respond, but Megan noticed him watching as she returned to the dining area. She hoped that curiosity, and perhaps a little hunger, might eventually coax him over. For now, she focused on the other children, who were enjoying their meal and sharing stories. It was a rare moment of peace in a day full of chaos, and Megan savored it. But the calm didn't last. Lucas eventually stomped into the room, clearly upset. He sat down with a dramatic huff, pushing the plate Megan had prepared for him to the side. "I don't like this food," he declared loudly, crossing his arms. One of his siblings sighed audibly. "You haven't even tried it," the older boy muttered under his breath, earning a glare from Lucas. Megan intervened quickly. "That's okay, Lucas," she said calmly. "If you're not hungry, you don't have to eat. But please stay at the table with us until everyone is finished." "I want something else," Lucas demanded, his voice growing louder. "Make me mac and cheese." Megan smiled softly. "Tonight, this is what we're having. You don't have to eat it, but I'm not making a separate meal. Maybe next time we can plan something you really enjoy together." Lucas's face reddened with frustration, and Megan braced herself. Sure enough, he grabbed the bread roll from his plate and threw it across the table. It hit one of his siblings square in the chest, causing the younger child to burst into tears. "That's enough, Lucas," Megan said firmly, but without raising her voice. "We don't throw food. Please apologize." "No!" Lucas shouted, standing up and knocking over his chair. "I hate this house. I hate all of you!" Before Megan could respond, Lucas stormed out of the room, his footsteps echoing through the house. The other children sat in stunned silence, their faces a mix of embarrassment and exhaustion. Megan quietly righted the fallen chair and helped the crying child wipe away their tears. "It's okay," she assured them. "Lucas is having a hard time, but we'll figure it out." One of the older children, a 10-year-old girl named Emma, shook her head sadly. "Mom always says he's just expressing himself, but he's so mean. It's like no one else matters." Megan listened carefully, sensing the frustration beneath Emma's words. "I understand how that might feel," she said gently. "It's hard when someone we care about doesn't act the way we want them to. But Lucas is still learning, just like everyone else." Emma didn't seem convinced, but she nodded reluctantly and returned to her plate. Megan made a mental note to give each child some individual attention later. For now, she needed to address the tension building between them and Lucas. After dinner, Megan found Lucas in the playroom, aggressively smashing toy cars into each other. She knelt down at his level, keeping a respectful distance. "Lucas, I can see you're really upset," she began. "Would you like to tell me what's bothering you?" "Go away," Lucas snapped, not looking at her. Megan didn't move. "I'm here to help if you need me," she said softly. "But it's not okay to hurt people or throw things when you're angry. We can talk about what's going on, or I can give you some space." Lucas glared at her, his lip quivering. For a moment, it looked like he might say something, but instead, he turned away, grabbing another toy and crashing it onto the floor. Megan let out a quiet sigh and stood up, deciding to give him the space he clearly needed. As she walked back to the kitchen to clean up, Megan reflected on the day. Lucas wasn't just defiant, he was deeply frustrated, perhaps even overwhelmed by feelings he didn't know how to process. Brenda's insistence on avoiding discipline had left Lucas without the tools to navigate his emotions or interact with others in a healthy way. Megan could see the toll it was taking, not only on Lucas but on his siblings, who bore the brunt of his outbursts. Still, Megan remained hopeful. She had dealt with difficult children before, and she knew change was possible with the right guidance. But she also understood that Brenda's approach was a significant barrier. Without clear boundaries, Lucas would continue to struggle, and the tension within the family would only grow. As the house finally quieted for the night, Megan resolved to address the issue carefully but directly. She would honor Brenda's parenting philosophy as much as possible, but she couldn't ignore the damage it was causing. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but Megan was determined to help Lucas and the entire family find a better way forward. The evening wore on, and the house settled into an uneasy calm. Megan guided the younger children through their bedtime routines, helping them brush their teeth and change into pajamas. Most of the kids seemed relieved to wind down after a day filled with tension. Lucas, however, was nowhere to be found. After tucking the others in, Megan began searching for him. She found Lucas in his bedroom, curled up in the corner with his favorite blanket clutched tightly in his hands. His face was streaked with tears, though he quickly turned away when he noticed her. Megan knelt down a few feet from him, careful not to invade his space. "Lucas," she said gently, "I can see you're feeling really upset. Would you like to talk about it?" He shook his head, burying his face deeper into the blanket. "That's okay," Megan continued. "Sometimes it's hard to talk when we're mad or sad, but I'm here when you're ready." For a moment, there was only silence. Then, in a barely audible voice, Lucas muttered, "Nobody likes me." Megan's heart ached at the vulnerability in his words. She inched a little closer, keeping her voice soft. "That's not true, Lucas. Your family loves you very much. I know today was hard, but that doesn't mean they don't care about you." "They're always mad at me," he replied, his voice trembling. "Even Mommy." Megan took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. "Sometimes when people get upset, it's not because they don't like you. It's because they want to help, but they don't know how. And sometimes we all make mistakes. That's just part of learning." Lucas peeked out from behind his blanket, his eyes red and puffy. "Do you get mad at me too?" Megan smiled gently. "No, Lucas, I'm not mad at you, but I do want to help you learn how to handle your big feelings so things can get better. It's not easy, but I believe you can do it." Lucas didn't say anything, but he seemed to relax slightly. Megan decided not to push further. "How about this?" she suggested. "We can start fresh tomorrow. I'll be here to help and we'll figure it out together. Does that sound okay?" He nodded hesitantly, his grip on the blanket loosening. "Good," Megan said, standing up. "Now, let's get you ready for bed. You've had a long day, and sleep will help you feel better." To her surprise, Lucas didn't resist. He followed her to the bathroom, where she helped him wash up, and then climbed into bed. As she tucked him in, Megan placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Good night, Lucas. Tomorrow's a new day." "Good night," he whispered, his voice small but sincere. As Megan left the room, she felt a flicker of hope. Lucas had taken a small but significant step toward opening up. It wasn't a solution yet, but it was a start, and for now, that was enough. The sun was shining brightly over the community playground, the air filled with the sounds of laughter and children's chatter. It was a typical weekend afternoon, with families enjoying the warm weather. Denise sat on a bench near the swings, scrolling through her phone while her 8-year-old daughter, Mia, ran off to claim her favorite swing. Mia was known for her bold personality, bright, confident, and fiercely protective of anything she considered hers. Denise often boasted about Mia's independence, calling her a natural leader. Nearby, Julia stood with her 5-year-old daughter, Emma, who was shyly pointing at the swings. "Mommy, can I use that one?" Emma asked, her small finger directed at the swing next to Mia. Julia smiled warmly. "Of course, sweetheart. Let's see if there's space." Emma toddled over cautiously, her little legs carrying her toward the swing Mia was on. As she reached for the adjacent swing, Mia turned sharply, narrowing her eyes. "No!" Mia shouted, gripping the chains of her own swing as if they were a shield. "These are mine!" Emma froze, startled by the outburst. "But I just want to swing," she said softly, her voice barely audible over the commotion of the playground. "You can't!" Mia snapped, jumping off her swing and stepping in front of the second one. "I'm using both!" Julia, seeing the tension unfold, walked over to mediate. "Mia," she said kindly but firmly, "there's plenty of room to share. Emma only wants to use this swing." Mia crossed her arms, her face set in a defiant scowl. She can't have it." Julia bent down to Emma's level. "It's okay, honey. Let's wait a moment." As Julia tried to reason with Mia, Denise finally looked up from her phone. She had noticed the interaction but hadn't moved, confident that Mia could handle herself. But now, seeing Julia close to her daughter, Denise's protective instincts kicked in. She strode over, her expression already hardened. "Is there a problem here?" Denise asked, her voice sharp. Julia stood up straight, meeting Denise's gaze. "I was just explaining to Mia that sharing is important. Emma wants to use the swing next to her." Denise raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. "Mia was here first. She's just protecting her space." Julia frowned. "She's refusing to share the swing, and Emma isn't trying to take it from her. She just wants to play too." Denise folded her arms, her tone growing colder. "Maybe if you taught your daughter to wait her turn, we wouldn't be having this conversation." The tension in the air was palpable now, drawing the attention of other parents and children nearby. Mia, emboldened by her mother's presence, stuck her tongue out at Emma. "See, I told you, it's mine." "Excuse me," Julia said, her voice firm but controlled. "Your daughter pushed mine when she tried to sit on the swing. That's not okay." Denise's eyes flashed. "Pushed? She's just a kid. Kids push sometimes. It's normal." Julia took a deep breath, trying to keep her composure. "Normal or not, it's not right. Mia should apologize." Denise let out a short, incredulous laugh. "Apologize? For what? For standing up for herself? She doesn't owe anyone an apology." By now, a small group of parents had gathered at the edge of the playground, watching the exchange. Some whispered among themselves, while others tried to distract their own children from the escalating argument. One father murmured, "Here we go again. Denise and her perfect kid." Julia knelt down beside Emma, who was now clutching her mother's leg, her tearful eyes peeking out at Mia. "It's okay, sweetie," Julia whispered. "You didn't do anything wrong." Denise, however, was far from finished. "If your daughter can't handle a little competition, maybe the playground isn't the best place for her." Julia straightened up, anger simmering beneath her calm demeanor. "Competition? This isn't a game, Denise. It's a swing. Teaching your daughter to share isn't about competition. It's about decency." Mia, sensing the tension and her mother's support, stomped her foot. "I don't have to share if I don't want to. Mommy says so." Denise smirked, clearly proud of her daughter's confidence. "That's right, Mia. You don't have to let anyone bully you into giving up what's yours." Julia's jaw tightened, but she forced herself to stay composed. "This isn't bullying, Denise. It's about teaching your daughter kindness and respect for others." Denise took a step closer, her voice dripping with condescension. "Don't lecture me about parenting, Julia. Just because you let your kid get pushed around doesn't mean I will." The conversation had gone from tense to outright hostile. Parents began to step closer, some subtly aligning themselves with Julia, while others chose to stay silent, wary of Denise's sharp tongue. The playground, once full of laughter, now felt like a battleground. Julia glanced down at Emma, who looked frightened and confused. She knew the confrontation was going nowhere, but refused to back down entirely. "We're not going to solve this here," Julia said finally, her voice steady. "But this isn't over." Denise scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. "Do whatever you need to feel better, Julia. My daughter and I are just fine." As Julia walked away with Emma, Denise stood her ground, her head held high. Mia climbed back onto her swing, triumphant, as the murmurs of disapproval from the crowd grew louder. Denise ignored them, convinced she had done the right thing. But beneath her confidence, the seeds of alienation were already taking root. As Julia and Emma retreated to a nearby bench, the tension in the playground refused to dissipate. Parents who had been bystanders moments ago began murmuring among themselves, their glances shifting between Denise and Julia. Some whispered about Denise's history of overreacting. Others sympathized with Julia's calm but firm stance. The air buzzed with unease, and it was clear that the incident wasn't going to blow over easily. Mia continued to swing, her head held high, smirking as if she had won a grand victory. Denise remained by the swings, her arms crossed and her gaze sweeping over the crowd, daring anyone to challenge her. One of the parents, a woman named Lisa, hesitated before stepping forward. She had seen enough of Denise's confrontations to know they rarely ended well, but her own child had been hurt by Mia in the past, and she felt compelled to speak up. "Denise," Lisa said cautiously, "I think Julia had a point. Mia pushing Emma wasn't okay. Maybe this is a chance to—" "Don't start with me, Lisa," Denise snapped, cutting her off. "If you want to lecture someone, go talk to Julia about letting her kid wander into other people's space." Lisa's face flushed with frustration. "It's not about space, Denise. It's about teaching kids how to get along." Denise rolled her eyes, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Oh, please, spare me the parenting advice. Last I checked, no one here is perfect." By now, the tension had escalated to the point where the children were beginning to notice. Some had stopped playing to watch the adults argue, their curious eyes darting back and forth like they were witnessing a tennis match. Others clung to their parents, sensing the discomfort in the air. The once lively playground felt heavier with every passing moment. Julia, watching from the bench, decided she couldn't let Denise's behavior go unchecked. She stood, holding Emma's hand, and walked back toward the swings. Though her heart pounded in her chest, she forced herself to remain calm. This wasn't just about her daughter, it was about setting an example for everyone watching. "Denise," Julia began, her tone measured. "I don't want this to turn into a bigger issue than it already is. All I'm asking is for Mia to apologize. That's not unreasonable." Denise laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound that echoed across the playground. "Unreasonable? What's unreasonable is you expecting my daughter to bow down to yours because she wanted to swing. Kids push, they fight, it's how they learn." Julia took a deep breath, steadying herself. "You're right, kids do make mistakes. But they also need to learn how to take responsibility for their actions. That's part of growing up." Denise's eyes narrowed. "And what gives you the right to tell me how to raise my kid?" "I'm not telling you how to raise her," Julia said firmly. "I'm asking you to think about how her actions affect others." The crowd around them had grown larger, parents and children alike drawn to the escalating conflict. Some parents whispered their support for Julia, but none dared to intervene directly. The playground felt like a pressure cooker, the tension building with every exchange. Denise, feeling the weight of the stares, decided to double down. "You all act like my daughter is some kind of monster," she said loudly, addressing the crowd. "She's a strong, independent girl, and I won't let anyone make her feel bad for standing up for herself." Julia's patience was wearing thin, but she refused to let her emotions take over. "This isn't about strength or independence," she said. "It's about teaching our kids to be kind and considerate. Emma didn't deserve to be pushed, and Mia can learn from this if you give her the chance." Denise shook her head, her voice rising. "You want me to humiliate my daughter in front of everyone? Forget it. She doesn't owe anyone anything." At that moment, one of the bystanders, a father named Mark, stepped forward. "Denise," he said, his tone calm but firm, "no one's asking for humiliation. We're all just trying to make this a safe space for our kids. If we don't hold them accountable, how will they learn?" Denise turned to him, her face flushed with anger. "I don't need a lecture from you either, Mark. Focus on your own kids and leave mine alone." Mark held up his hands, backing away, but his intervention had made an impact. The murmurs among the crowd grew louder, and Denise could feel the tide turning against her. She glanced at Mia, who was still swinging as if nothing had happened, and for the first time, a flicker of doubt crossed her face. Julia saw the hesitation and seized the opportunity. "Denise," she said softly, "this doesn't have to be a big deal. An apology can go a long way, not just for Emma, but for Mia too. It's a chance for her to learn something important." For a brief moment, it seemed like Denise might relent. But then Mia jumped off the swing and ran to her mother's side, clinging to her arm. "Don't make me say sorry, Mommy," she pleaded, her voice small but insistent. Denise's resolve hardened again. She wrapped her arm protectively around Mia and looked directly at Julia. "We're done here," she said coldly. "Come on, Mia." As Denise walked away, her head held high, the crowd began to disperse, the mood heavy with unspoken judgment. Julia watched them go, a mix of frustration and sadness washing over her. Emma tugged at her hand, looking up with wide, confused eyes. "Why didn't she say sorry, Mommy?" Julia knelt down, hugging her daughter tightly. "Sometimes, sweetie," she said gently, "people don't always do the right thing. but that doesn't mean we stop trying to be kind. The lesson hung in the air, bittersweet and unresolved, as the playground slowly returned to its usual rhythm. But for Denise and Mia, the consequences of their actions were only beginning to unfold. Denise marched away from the playground, gripping Mia's hand tightly. She held her head high, her steps firm, determined not to let anyone see the cracks forming in her composure. Mia skipped beside her, oblivious to the tension that lingered in the air. She looked up at her mother with a proud grin. "I didn't say sorry, and you didn't make me," she chirped. "That's right, sweetheart," Denise replied, forcing a smile. "You stood your ground, and I'm proud of you." But as they approached the parking lot, Denise couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on her back. The murmurs, the disapproving glances from the other parents, had struck deeper than she cared to admit. She glanced at Mia, who was now swinging her arm playfully, seemingly unbothered by the day's events. Denise tried to convince herself that she had done the right thing, that protecting her daughter was more important than appeasing the judgmental crowd. Later that evening, as Denise prepared dinner, the events of the playground replayed in her mind. Mia sat at the kitchen table, humming to herself as she colored. The scribbles on the page were wild and vibrant, reflecting her carefree spirit. For a moment, Denise felt a pang of doubt. Was she truly helping Mia by shielding her from accountability, or was she setting her up for failure? Her thoughts were interrupted when the doorbell rang. Denise opened the door to find Lisa standing there, holding a plate of cookies. Denise's guard went up immediately. "What do you want, Lisa?" Lisa hesitated, clearly nervous but determined. "I just wanted to talk, not about what happened earlier, just as a friend." Denise narrowed her eyes but stepped aside to let Lisa in. As Lisa set the plate on the counter, she spoke carefully. "Look, Denise, I know we've clashed before, but I care about Mia. She's a great kid, and I know you want the best for her. I just think—" Lisa paused, choosing her words. Sometimes, letting her face small consequences now might help her avoid bigger problems later. Denise stiffened. "You think I don't know what's best for my daughter?" Lisa held up her hands in a placating gesture. "No, that's not what I'm saying. I've seen this before. My nephew was a lot like Mia, strong-willed, always pushing boundaries. My sister never corrected him because she thought she was protecting his confidence. But when he got older, it became harder to unteach those behaviors." Denise crossed her arms, her defensiveness flaring. "Mia isn't your nephew." "No, she's not," Lisa admitted. "She's her own person, and that's what makes her special. But teaching her empathy and accountability doesn't take away from her strength. It adds to it." Denise didn't respond immediately. Her mind raced with conflicting thoughts. Her fierce desire to protect Mia, the unease she felt under the playground parents' judgment, and the kernel of truth in Lisa's words. "Thanks for the cookies," Denise said finally, her tone dismissive. Lisa nodded, sensing she had said all she could. As she left, Denise turned to watch Mia, who was now coloring a crown on her latest masterpiece. "Mommy," Mia said without looking up, "can we go back to the playground tomorrow?" Denise hesitated, the weight of her choices pressing down on her. "We'll see, sweetheart," she replied softly, her voice tinged with uncertainty. It was a quiet Saturday afternoon at a small convenience store tucked into the corner of a suburban strip mall. The warm buzz of fluorescent lights filled the air, mingling with the faint sound of a local radio station playing from overhead speakers. Lisa, the store clerk, stood behind the counter, organizing the display of gum and candy by the register. She enjoyed these slower moments of the day when the chaos of the morning rush had faded, leaving her with time to tidy up. At the far end of the aisle, 10-year-old Ryan wandered among the shelves. He was the kind of kid who exuded mischief, with a smirk that rarely left his face and eyes that darted around, always searching for the next opportunity to push boundaries. His mother, Brenda, had dropped him off at the store's entrance with a casual, "I'll be right back," before disappearing into a nearby boutique. Ryan was left unsupervised, a situation he relished. As Lisa glanced up from her work, she noticed Ryan acting suspiciously. His small frame lingered a bit too long by the candy aisle, his hands dipping into the pockets of his oversized jacket. He glanced over his shoulder, checking if anyone was watching, before slipping a candy bar into his pocket. Then another, and another. Lisa sighed inwardly, already familiar with this scene. She stepped out from behind the counter and approached him with a calm but firm demeanor. "Hey there," she said kindly. "Need help finding something?" Ryan froze, his hand halfway to another candy bar. For a brief moment, guilt flashed across his face, but it was quickly replaced by defiance. "Nope," he replied, his voice tinged with a challenge. Lisa gestured toward his pocket. Why don't we check what you've got there? Ryan hesitated, then shrugged exaggeratedly, as if he were being unfairly accused. Fine, he muttered, pulling out the candy bars one by one and slamming them onto the shelf. There, happy? Lisa nodded but didn't let her guard down. It's important to pay for what we take, she said gently. You can't just take something because you want it. Ryan rolled his eyes. Whatever, it's just candy. Before Lisa could respond, the door swung open, and Brenda strode into the store, her heels clicking against the tiled floor. She spotted Ryan and immediately sensed the tension in the air. Her expression shifted from curiosity to irritation. What's going on here? She demanded, her voice sharp. Lisa turned to her, keeping her tone neutral. Hi, ma'am. I caught your son putting some candy in his pocket. I asked him to return it, and he did. I just wanted to make sure he understands that. Brenda cut her off, her face flushing with indignation. Are you accusing my son of stealing? Lisa blinked, caught off guard by Brenda's sudden aggression. I'm not accusing him. I saw him take the candy, and I asked him to return it. That's all. Brenda scoffed, stepping closer. He's just a kid. Kids make mistakes. You don't need to treat him like a criminal. Lisa took a deep breath, trying to maintain her composure. I'm not treating him like a criminal, ma'am. I just wanted to teach him that it's important to follow the rules. Brenda's voice rose, echoing through the small store. The only mistake here is you thinking you have the right to lecture my son. How dare you embarrass him like this? Customers at the back of the store began turning their heads toward the commotion. Ryan stood silently beside his mother, the defiant smirk creeping back onto his face as he watched her take control of the situation. Lisa remained calm. I wasn't trying to embarrass him. I just wanted to address the situation before it became a bigger issue. But Brenda was far from finished. This is absolutely unacceptable. You have no idea how to handle children. You're lucky I don't call your manager right now and have you fired. Lisa took another deep breath, trying to suppress the frustration rising within her. I understand you're upset, but my intention was simply to— Save it, Brenda snapped, cutting her off again. You're not a teacher, you're a cashier. Maybe stick to your job instead of trying to parent other people's kids. Lisa stood there, stunned into silence, as Brenda grabbed Ryan's hand and marched toward the exit. Come on, Ryan, she said loudly, making sure everyone in the store could hear her. We're never shopping here again. As the door slammed shut behind them, the tension in the store dissipated slightly, but Lisa was left feeling rattled. She had only wanted to handle the situation with care, but Brenda's reaction had turned what could have been a teachable moment into a scene. Little did Lisa know, the drama that had unfolded was far from over. Several customers had recorded the altercation on their phones, capturing Brenda's outburst in all its fiery glory. Within hours, the videos would find their way to social media, igniting a storm that neither Brenda nor Ryan could have anticipated. The videos of Brenda's fiery outburst spread across social media faster than she could have imagined. By the time she returned home from her errands, notifications on her phone were pinging non-stop. Friends, acquaintances, and even strangers were tagging her in posts and sending her messages. Some were supportive, cheering her on for standing up for her son, but the overwhelming majority were less than kind. Entitled Karen Strikes Again, read one comment beneath the most viewed video, which had already amassed thousands of shares. Another user had captioned their post, "When defending bad behavior becomes the real crime." Brenda's name was trending locally, and her face was plastered across countless memes that depicted her pointing an accusing finger at the store clerk. Unaware of the brewing storm, Ryan was lounging on the couch, scrolling through his tablet. "Mom, look," he said with a hint of amusement, holding up a video of their altercation. Brenda's face appeared on the screen, her voice loud and indignant. "Do they think this is funny?" Brenda asked, her face turning red as she grabbed the tablet from Ryan. She stared at the video, her own voice echoing back at her. "He's just a kid. You have no right to treat him like this." Her stomach churned as she read the comments flooding in. They weren't just criticizing her parenting, they were dissecting every word she'd said, every gesture she'd made. Strangers debated her choices as though they were experts on her life. "She's raising a thief, and she doesn't even care," one commenter wrote. "Poor kid doesn't stand a chance with a mom like that," added another. Brenda slammed the tablet onto the coffee table, the screen flickering off. "This is ridiculous," she exclaimed. "People have no idea what really happened." Ryan, still unbothered, shrugged. "Who cares? You told them off. That was awesome." But Brenda didn't feel awesome. She felt cornered, attacked by people who didn't know her, didn't understand the pressure of being a single mom, and certainly didn't care about the context. All they cared about was the spectacle. Still, she wasn't about to back down. Brenda had never been one to admit she was wrong, and she wasn't going to start now. "This isn't over," she muttered, grabbing her phone. The next day, Brenda stormed into the convenience store, Ryan trailing behind her. The moment she entered, Lisa's face fell. She had been dreading Brenda's return, though she wasn't surprised. Brenda's arrival was dramatic as ever, her heels clicking sharply against the floor and her voice cutting through the quiet atmosphere. "I want to speak to your manager," Brenda announced loudly, pointing a manicured finger at Lisa. Lisa straightened her shoulders, maintaining her composure. "Of course," she replied, walking to the back to fetch her supervisor, Mark. When Mark appeared, Brenda wasted no time launching into her tirade. "Your employee humiliated my son yesterday," she began, her voice rising with every word. "She accused him of stealing and treated him like a criminal. My son is 10 years old. He's a child. Is that how your store treats families?" Mark listened patiently, his expression neutral. When Brenda finished, he glanced at Lisa, who stood silently, her hands clasped in front of her. "Ma'am," Mark began, "I've reviewed the security footage from yesterday, and it clearly shows your son taking candy and attempting to leave without paying." Brenda's face flushed. "So what if he took candy? He's just a kid. Kids make mistakes. That doesn't give your employee the right to humiliate him in public." Mark sighed, choosing his words carefully. "Lisa didn't humiliate anyone. She handled the situation professionally and asked your son to return the items. That's all." "Well, I'm not satisfied," Brenda snapped. "I demand an apology. And frankly, I think Lisa should be fired. She clearly doesn't know how to interact with children." Mark's expression hardened slightly. "I'm sorry you feel that way, but Lisa did her job. We have a responsibility to protect our merchandise, and she handled it appropriately. If you're unhappy with our policies, you're welcome to shop elsewhere." Brenda's jaw dropped. "Shop elsewhere? You're telling me to leave?" "I'm saying this situation has been addressed," Mark replied calmly. "There's nothing more to discuss." Brenda's eyes darted around the store, noticing a few customers watching from the aisles. One of them held up their phone, recording her once again. She felt the heat of embarrassment rising in her chest, but she refused to let it show. "Fine," she exclaimed, grabbing Ryan's hand. "We don't need this store anyway." As she stormed out, Lisa let out a quiet sigh of relief. Mark gave her a reassuring nod before returning to his office. The store returned to its usual rhythm, but the memory of Brenda's dramatic exit lingered in the minds of those who had witnessed it. Outside, Brenda fumed. "Unbelievable," she muttered, shaking her head. "This is why people need to stand up for themselves." Ryan tugged on her arm. "Can we go get burgers now?" he asked, his voice carefree. Brenda forced a smile. "Sure, sweetheart. Let's go." But deep down, doubt began to creep into her mind. For the first time, she wondered if the problem wasn't everyone else, but her own unwillingness to admit that maybe, just maybe, Ryan had been wrong. Brenda hoped the ordeal at the store would fade away, but the internet had other plans. By the time she woke up the next morning, her phone was inundated with messages. The videos of her confrontation with the store clerk had exploded online, and Brenda's face was now unmistakable to anyone who had scrolled through their social media feeds. "Great," she muttered as she scrolled through the latest comments. Strangers were picking apart her every word, her every gesture. Memes now featured her face alongside captions like, "My kid can do no wrong, Karen 101, and "Stealing is just a mistake, right?" Ryan, meanwhile, remained unfazed. He lounged on the couch, laughing at some of the videos that had gone viral. "Mom, look at this one," he said, holding up his phone. "They made you look like a wrestler about to fight Lisa." Brenda groaned, snatching the phone from him. "It's not funny, Ryan," she said sharply. "People are making fun of us." Ryan shrugged. "So? You told them off. Who cares what they think?" But Brenda cared, even if she didn't want to admit it. The relentless online ridicule had begun to sting. Worse, the attention wasn't confined to the internet. At work, her coworkers whispered behind her back, and one even showed her the video during a coffee break, pretending to ask for her side of the story. At Ryan's school, parents exchanged knowing glances and sidelong comments when she picked him up. What frustrated Brenda the most was the growing backlash against her parenting. Everywhere she looked, people were questioning her choices, accusing her of enabling bad behavior. It was one thing for her to stand up for her son, but being labeled Karen of the Month was something else entirely. By midweek, the consequences of her actions began to ripple into Ryan's world. At school, his classmates teased him mercilessly. "Did your mom buy you a get-out-of-jail-free card for stealing candy?" one boy jeered during recess. Ryan tried to laugh it off, but the taunts stung. For the first time, he began to wonder if what he had done was wrong. That evening, Ryan hesitated before speaking up at dinner. "Mom?" he asked, his tone quieter than usual. "Do you think maybe I shouldn't have taken the candy?" Brenda froze, her fork hovering over her plate. She didn't know how to respond. Admitting Ryan had done something wrong felt like admitting defeat, not just to him, but to everyone who had criticized her. Still, his question lingered in the air, pressing on her conscience. "Well," she said finally, carefully choosing her words, "you should always pay for things, Ryan. But people make mistakes, and that's okay too." Ryan nodded, though he didn't look entirely convinced. Brenda quickly changed the subject, steering the conversation away from the uncomfortable truth. As the days passed, the videos and memes began to fade from the spotlight, replaced by the next viral sensation. But for Brenda, the experience left a lasting mark. She continued to defend her actions outwardly, but late at night, when the house was quiet, she found herself replaying the incident in her mind. For the first time, she couldn't escape the nagging thought that perhaps the world wasn't entirely wrong, and maybe, just maybe, Ryan needed a parent who could teach him accountability, not just someone who fought his battles for him. That's it for today's episode of Threads of Kindness. Parenting isn't a one-size-fits-all journey, but small moments of accountability and kindness can make a big difference. What would you have done in these situations? Let us know in the comments, and if you enjoyed this episode, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more thought-provoking stories. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.